I went to graduate school being very interested in domestic violence more generally, so child abuse, partner violence, and when I got to graduate school, I started doing volunteer work in a shelter for women who had experienced partner violence. And I was also learning clinical neuropsychology, so understanding the brain behavior relationships, and what happens when you have a brain injury, and how you can sustain brain injuries, et cetera. So as I worked with these women, I realized these women seem to be sustaining brain injuries, and they also seem to have a lot of the symptoms that people who otherwise sustain brain injuries have. And so I said, I wonder what we know about this, because this seems to be a real problem. And then there wasn't anything in the literature. So I said, okay, well, I guess I'm just gonna have to try to study this, and that's what did it. And then I just did that for my dissertation research and found a ridiculously high rate of brain injuries in women who experience partner violence and negative associations with those brain injuries. So I kind of just tried to keep it moving.
Yes, wonderful. And how have you seen the reception of your study change over this time or evolve?
It's interesting. I mean, really, there has not been a lot of interest for the most part. You have to get funding, and I have always been able to get funding, but it hasn't always been easy. And there wasn't necessarily a lab that I could go into to do more work in this area because people just weren't doing it. And I think when we think about people who are valued in society, certainly in the United States, where I do my work, people who are valued tend to be people either in the entertainment business or potentially, famous sports individuals, et cetera. So those folks get a lot of attention, and so people are recognizing brain injury there. But women who are experiencing partner violence, there's not a lot of money. People don't understand partner violence the way we really should. And so it's sort of kind of just not considered to be that important, I think, by most people. Or maybe some people think it's a personal thing, just deal with it, or if she wanted to leave, she should just leave, because people totally misunderstand. At any rate, I just think it really hadn't gotten the recognition it deserved for very, very, very long. And in the past, let's say 5 years, there's been a growing recognition. And then in the past few years, there's been much more. There's more people doing research in the area, more people recognizing it as an issue. For example, Nick invited me out here to give this keynote, which I thought was incredible, and I was so thrilled to have that opportunity. So there is a growing recognition that this is a problem, but as most gender-based violence and women issues, typically not as valued as men's issues, honestly. I think there's misogyny, et cetera. So, yeah, but I think we're growing, the area is growing. Which I think is an incredibly optimistic and positive sign. And hopefully we can just keep that ball rolling and get more funding and research in the area.
I hate to say it, but the patriarchy still maintains such a grip on attention and on funding. I wish I didn't have to say the P word, but it remains a problem. There is hope, though, isn't there?
Yeah.
Would you say?
Exactly. I mean, there's been a tremendous growth in the attention that this topic has gotten over the years. I mean, there's like nothing before. Now there's still not a lot in the sense of if you compare it to other groups who experience brain injuries. But there are many researchers in this field doing this work now versus before, where there was like a couple other people. I kind of knew absolutely everybody who might be doing this work. Now I meet new people, and I'm like, oh wow, you're doing this too. And so it's really fabulous that there's just a greater recognition that this is an issue. And people now have like other people to go to say, oh wow, like this is an issue, can I learn from you or whatever. So it's like we're getting the building blocks for establishing a greater infrastructure for establishing this as a real issue that needs to be addressed and understood and studied.
That's fantastic. It's very, very heartening to hear that we are gaining attention where it's so desperately needed. Could you let me know of the different contributing factors to intimate partner violence? Would you say that culture has a skin in the game?
Yes. There are a lot of factors, but certainly, I mean, for example, if you go across the globe, in some places it's actually acceptable and sanctioned to beat your wife.
Yes.
And the family members can do it too. So that's certainly, in the United States, it's not sanctioned. There are crimes, but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen all the time, and people are not taking it as seriously. But it's actually, there is a difference there. So, and then there's some cultures where it's like you're married to this person or religion, you need to make it work.
Yes.
So there's various factors. I mean, but then there's also just the fact that once women are in a relationship, I mean, people go into relationships because they care for the other person. And then, there still may be that caring. And so there's a lot of different things that go into it. Finances.
Yes.
Ability to have other people to go to.
Yes.
Or other people, it's like if you're isolated or not.
And shame as well.
The stigma is absolutely huge. Oh yeah, I mean, women have said, I didn't know what to do. I couldn't leave because I had no money. I was embarrassed. I didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't know what to do with my kids.
Yes.
And like the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say also, yes, that's what I was going to say. I know, for instance, here in Australia, in fact, I think it was South Australia, intimate partner violence, even extending to rape, was still legal until the early 80s. Isn't that amazing? Isn't it amazing?
I wish I could say I was shocked.
No. When I learnt that statistic, I was flabbergasted, intimidated by how far it seems that we still have to go to be seen as worthy individuals, to be seen as worthy of respect and worthy of protection.
Exactly. I mean, from my point of view, I think we want to say, well, be optimistic that we're heading in the right direction. Hopefully it keeps going in the right direction. But absolutely, there is so much work to be done. We're nowhere near where we need to be.
No. So I saw only a little bit of your presentation, and you were speaking about how the shearing of the axons in the brain, because they were such vulnerable and fragile pieces of. Would you like to speak a little bit more about that? And
it's when people sustain concussions, we know that there's negative effects, right? We see it. But if you were to give that individual a brain scan or have them undergo a brain scan, MRI or CT, usually the brain will look just fine. And so the question is, well, what, that doesn't necessarily make sense, right? Shouldn't we see it? Well, no, we can't necessarily see it, but there's a couple of things. There's a cascade of neurotransmitters and neurochemicals and stuff like that, which can affect the brain in different ways. But there's also, these little axons. I mean, they can form bundles, right, and then be actually big tracts. But these axons are tiny and microscopic. And so you can imagine really strong forces in the brain. You have the hemispheres like this.
Yes.
So you can have the hemispheres going like this. You can imagine.
Shearing.
And the thing is the brain is set up such that it's okay for there to be movement. And, if it's going slowly and stuff, you can have these forces that's not necessarily bad. But when it's really strong, that's when we tend to get more problems.
Yes.
And so you can have these, what we refer to as I said in the lecture earlier, this diffuse axonal injury.
Yes.
Where you don't necessarily see one big spot, one big hematoma or something, but what we don't see is that these axons, which are really critical for communication between brain cells, have been damaged, potentially in different places of the brain.
Yeah.
And so we don't really have, I don't know, we're constantly, technology is constantly getting better, but for the most part, concussions look like you're like, oh, yeah, standard thing, like, yep, your brain's okay. And people, when people talk about having blood tests, for example, to measure concussions, and like if this is grade or versus MRIs or whatever. People, I think, sometimes think, oh, that must mean that you go and get an MRI to rule in a concussion. Really what you're doing is you're going to have an MRI to rule out something worse.
Yes.
So a brain scan will pick up something that could be lethal, like a hematoma or some bleed or something. And so when people go to the ED, for example, they may have one to make sure it's not worse than that.
Yes.
But it's not saying that you don't have a concussion just because you don't have anything there.
No.
And so these blood tests will actually measure sort of what you might see if there is a bleed or something like that. And so they'll say, oh yeah, this shows high levels of X, Y, or Z, so this is really, really likely that there's a bleed in the brain. And so then you go and have that extra test or whatever, and then it could be potentially life-saving.
I know that I was talking to a lady just yesterday who didn't even have an MRI when she went to hospital, wasn't even given it, but she is obviously living with a brain injury.
Yeah.
I find, so patchy to see the quality of care that you get from different hospitals or from different places. I wanted to ask you, how important do you think that an event like this is for the sector, for greater society?
So an event like this Brain
Injury Australia Conference.
I think for me, and for what I'm trying to do and raise awareness, I think it's huge. Because right now I just had the opportunity to share this information with so many people who probably have no idea really kind of what is going on. I mean, I wouldn't know if I didn't study this. There's a lot of stuff. I mean, obviously I've been doing this for years, so I've taught myself. I've learned. But this isn't something that's talked about. You don't, see this everywhere. There's not pamphlets lying around telling people about this or how to understand partner violence or how that may interact with brain injury. So for me, it's really exciting to have the opportunity to share what I do and this information with so many people.
Yes.
I think it's huge. Yeah.
Let's hope this is the beginning of I'm not going to say a sea change, but of a seismic change in awareness and attention to this subject. Because it's so desperately needed, isn't it?
Yeah, that would be fabulous.
Yeah, fantastic. So I can imagine that you go to conferences like this around the world or around the US for sure. How does this conference compare to other experiences that you've had?
I think this conference is good. I mean, I think it's big. And from my point of view, I was given a keynote opportunity, which is great because you have everybody in the conference. It's not like there's all these different sessions. Usually in conferences, and I was just speaking to the Brain Injury Association, IBIA, International Brain Injury Association, they've never actually had a keynote on the intersection of IPV and brain injury.
Wow. Do you think that's something that's going to change now?
Yes. Because I know my girlfriend, my good friend, Catherine Schnedeker, is the CEO of Pink Concussions.
Of course. We met her earlier in the year at the, at the Mild Head Injury and Concussion Trauma Forum in Melbourne.
In March.
Yes.
I was with her when she came up from New Zealand.
Yeah, and she had the concussion.
Yes, and she broke her wrist.
Yeah. So ask her if she remembers us.
Oh, I'm sure she does.
We both spoke to her.
I'm sure she does.
Yes, wonderful.
But in general, it's because I said, it's really remarkable. I've given lectures all over the place. I've given lots and lots of lectures. But when I think of the big conferences, I was like, I don't think there's ever been a keynote on the intersection of IPV and brain injury. And that just is not right. So luckily, Catherine will be giving a keynote in Montreal, which is the next IBIA. And she focuses more on women and girls, but she's obviously very engaged in this particular topic. I'm sure she'll talk about it some. And we have a pre-conference day that I was invited to do that's going to be on the intersection of IPV and brain injury. So again, it's not a keynote, but the recognizing this is something that would be worthwhile for a pre-conference.
Step by step by step by step.
So we are making progress. That's awesome.
Yes.
But I think this is fabulous. I'm like, when Nick invited me, I was just like, say no more.
Yeah.
This is I mean, these are the opportunities I live for, because I really just, I mean, it doesn't need to be me, right? I just want anyone to be talking about, anyone who knows, to be talking about this at a very high level, where it's not, one of 25 sessions or one of 4 sessions, or even one of 3, we're getting better, one of 2, we're getting better. But when if you have like concussion, just someone talking about concussion or whatever, and then IPV, TBI, more people are going to go to that one.
Yeah, of course they are, because it's less confronting.
And I'm not sure, I don't even know exactly why, but I think, again, that people just aren't like, I'm not really that interested in partner violence. So hopefully that's going to change. Because I think one of the things I try to emphasize to people is that we all know somebody who's experienced partner violence, even if we don't know it. Because it's not something that people like to brag about or wear.
No.
Like, yeah, I've experienced partner violence. No. I mean, it's stigmatizing and shaming, and it shouldn't be, but it is. And so if people can recognize that, oh, well, yeah, this might be my mother, this might be my daughter, this might be my sister, then they're like, oh, this is something I should be interested in.
Yes.
People who are interested in this, they're like, oh yeah, my daughter or my mother, that it's because they know somebody. But what I'm trying to convince people to understand is you do know somebody.
Of course.
You just may not know it.
Yes.
And if you actually open up the conversation, you may realize that you can actually help. Maybe they don't need help now. Maybe it was a while ago.
Yes.
But maybe they do.
Yes.
And either way, this violence thrives in silence. The more we talk about it, the better.
Violence thrives in silence. I really admire that collection of words, because it really denotes the fact of the matter and the reality of it. Thank you again, Eve.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us on this show. If you want to get in touch with us, just email info@anewyou.au. See you next week.